Ready to level up your leadership? This is the Growth Project. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Growth Project 2024 first episode. Hope you've all had a great break and Christmas and holidays and all that. And if you're lucky enough to still be on break, then good for you. But I am back at work, first week back, and it is brutal. It's amazing how much you settle into comfortable life when you don't have a work schedule to keep up. But today, I'm really thrilled that my first episode in 24 is with my good mate and colleague, Fiona Leishman. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just to give a bit of background, I'll give everyone a background as to why you're here and how we know each other. So we have worked together on and off for a long time, and your background is predominantly in education, but you've been in managing projects and things like that as well. So there was a period of time where we worked together. There was a period of time that we didn't work together, and now, how long has it been now?
4 years.
4 years again? Yeah. So Fiona has been our compliance manager at our RTO for quite a while, but in more recent times now, operations manager and compliance manager superstar. And we've got a small but really fun, cool, high-performing team here. Would that be a fair call, do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So basically where we're at is that myself and John, who people will recognise from a couple of other episodes, we look after the training delivery, but Fiona looks after all the scheduling and all the compliance and the day-to-day operations, whilst John and I are out there delivering training and things like that. So Fiona has basically full control of the day-to-day operations and coordination of our business. And we have a lot of conversations about leadership and there's a lot of conversations about what we want this experience to be for employees when working here. And I think we've done pretty good job.
Yeah, I do too.
And we've definitely hit some hurdles and bumps, but I think we do a really good job of writing those out and course correcting. And there's times where we want to strangle each other. There's no doubt, but I think we're pretty good at working things through. Would you agree if I said that there's a process we tend to go through?
Yes, there is a natural process for sure.
Yeah. What's your view on what that's like?
It has its ups and downs, but I feel like now we are in the flow of it and I can see it coming. So it feels more natural and there's icky bits, but I know that we always get to where we need to. So it's easy.
Yeah. And we've got I've already said this, but we've got a really great team. This is a pretty unique workplace. And I think that can't happen without people leading the business who share a common vision and set of values as well. And that's where I think we've been lucky in that we share that. So for the most part, there's very little friction. But what we're really good at, though, is you said that there's icky bits sometimes and things get testy, but we always capitalize on that, though.
Yeah. But there's some self-growth in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So because what we do well, I think, is that we challenge each other on things, and that's where the tricky stuff happens every time.
Yeah.
Is where we challenge each other on things. And sometimes there's a journey, but there's always a point where it's okay, I see merit, let's give it a try, or why don't we try that but also work XYZ into it and things like that. So this is a small business and we don't have big training budgets. We don't have big development budgets.
No.
We're not doing uni courses on the side and all those sorts of things that perhaps some people in larger businesses have access to. So I think a lot of our growth has come from the thirst for growth. That seems to be from my observation of everyone else in this business, but especially you, when you seem to always be looking at better ways to do things, or you're challenging your own thoughts on leadership and what it means to be an employee, and do we really need to stick to the mold and all those things. You really challenge that. So what do you think? Why do you do that? And that's not a stop it.
I think I do that here because I have the freedom to. And like you said, yes, we don't have massive budgets and the likes, but the silver lining to that is that we have flexibility. Being a small business with a close-knit group of people, we give each other the support and the freedom to come up with something that doesn't fit the normal mold. We don't have a massive HR department or a legal team that says, no, that doesn't fit the narrative. So we have that freedom to come up with something new or to challenge concepts. And I think that's the best part about it.
Yeah, I do too. So we had a conversation, I think it was a little bit about this leadership model that I'm working on.
Yeah.
A little bit before Christmas, because I explained to you that I was going through a little bit of a, what would I call it? Imposter syndrome, maybe is the best descriptor, where I was thinking, it's lucky that Fiona's able to keep the ship running when I'm out doing all these other things, because we'd be in strife if we didn't have that in place, right? But then I think I might have hit a self-conscious part where I'm like, oh, geez, in some ways, Fee's outperforming me. Fee's outperforming me. I'm meant to be the leader here, and I'm not the one. I'm not teaching her new things, and I'm not leading her growth. She's doing it by herself, and through my own reflection, what I've identified, and that was the inspiration for a new model that I'm working on called the Empowered Growth Leadership Model. And because the realization I've come to is that if I'm trying to help someone grow, it's not about me providing them with the skills or the knowledge. I mean, not me showing them how to do a thing. I'm always going to do that if I think I can, but where I've noticed, I think the biggest growth is, and I think I've done it not knowingly, we shared the same values anyway.
Yes.
And we knew that. So, and we work closely on a lot of things in this business, and that means that you have a really sound understanding of the kinds of things that I do and don't do, and the way that I like to solve certain problems, or the kinds of decisions I would typically make and the general direction I would typically take. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily always going to do the same kinds of things, but you have that knowledge of what would Jason do. And so there's that. And then what you've always done, though, is always made it really clear what resources that you need to be able to deliver what I need you to deliver. And for the most part, we find a way to get whatever it is that we need. And because we have a close working relationship for a long time, there's the trust there, and there's the empowerment. And the empowerment for me was a tricky one for me to work through, because there's a lot of trust when you own a business. There's a lot of trust in handing the full control almost of the day-to-day running of the business to someone else. That's a really difficult thing to do. But I was in a position where there really wasn't a choice anyway, whether I liked it or not. And so not knowingly, that meant naturally that you were empowered to make the decisions that you needed to make, and the actions that needed to be done, and just execute them. And then from me just sitting back and going, wow, that's amazing. That's great. Excellent. Thank you for resolving that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so what I realized was, that was a really long way of getting to this final point. The final point is that I quickly had this realization that, hang on, it's not just that in some ways Fiona's outperforming me. What it is she was provided with everything that she needed, and she had the drive to make the right decisions, make the best decisions, best position herself to do those things. And that's where there was just an explosion of growth.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, well, hang on a minute. Maybe I still have contributed to that growth.
Yeah.
By even some of it being unknowingly, put all those things in place. Yeah.
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 I think sharing the same core values to me equals understanding the assignment. And I think that's why it's felt quite easy. And I think that you're underestimating your support to me. I think you do it through inspiration. You inspire me regularly to step up and do something. And I do remember that conversation. And I remember reflecting upon a circumstance that happened just before that where I had to make a call to someone. It was quite funny because you put me in that position, and I don't know if you meant to, where you gave me a choice. You said, oh, I could do that, or you could do that. And every part of me, even as a manager of people, every part of me wanted to say, yeah, you do it. That's fine, because it was outside of my comfort zone and I knew that you knew exactly how to handle it. And I worried perhaps, would I handle it how Jason would need it to be handled? But because I had a minute to sit in it and you really allowed that space for me to sit in that, I thought, I have to do this. So I grit and bear, and I did. And whilst I didn't want to and I was worried about the outcome, I did, and it was excellent, and there was a lot of self-fulfillment in that for me. But I feel like that was a perfect example of you, in your words, getting out of my way and letting me lead or grow in that manner. Yeah, and it worked out really well, and I experienced some more self-growth from just that moment in time. So I am a manager and I have a manager. And so sometimes I have to make a decision on how I'm going to act about it and remind myself that how I would want my team to act. So referring back to that moment where I was sort of pushed out of my comfort zone, or you allowed me to sit outside of my comfort zone, I could reflect and think, how would I want my team, and especially leading women, how would I want my team to be empowered to act? So being in the middle of the org chart, I can look at it from both perspectives, how I want to be led and how I want to lead. So it helps me act in a manner that is advantageous for both.
And that's so critical, I think, for effective leadership, in that that's the getting your hands dirty part.
Yeah.
That's the you getting in the trenches, because that phone call could also have been delegated by you to your team as well. But you chose the part of getting your hands dirty. And that's when I think back at the managers that I've had that I really respected, the only ones that I've ever really respected, were the ones that would get their hands dirty with me as well. So, but that's also you putting your values and vision on display for your team as well. So that's you doing the same thing that I'm trying to describe as well. Because you can't expect someone to demonstrate those behaviors if they're not seeing them themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Resources can be tricky for a small business, right?
Yep.
Because sometimes resources are expensive and costly, like new student databases and things like that.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous topic. We'll quickly divert away from that now. But resources can be hard to come by sometimes.
Yeah. And
that's where we have to get really creative. And we're pretty good. Our business is pretty good at that. So what are your thoughts, though, on how critical it is for open mindsets, both for the leader and the team, when we have some conversations like, we would like XYZ to help make this thing easier. And where someone has to say, yep, I see it, but no. How critical is the open mindset?
It's absolutely the most critical part. But referring back to that conversation we had earlier where most of these challenging concepts come up and we go through that journey, I think we're lucky that we know each other very well personally. So when I can see resistance or I have been part of the resistance, I can recognize that we've been on this journey before and that's not the end of the journey, and to lean right into that and what that means. Like, what is that person's experience? Why are they resisting immediately? And sometimes that just needs some inertia. Sometimes that's the first conversation and it can finish, but we revisit it when things are ready, when the dust has settled. Because even I believe that the individual who's saying the no or being the person to resist will go away and go on a journey themselves. Perhaps it's not the end in their mind either. They're initially saying no, but they're carrying that with them for a while and may be ready to revisit it.
Yeah. What sort of things do you think vary in your responses? So is it the timing, or is it the way that the style of your delivery, or where you'd have the conversation, or is it a whole bunch of things, or do you sort of go on instinct and intuition?
Yeah, it's all of those. I think you just need to be really in tune with how the individual's responding to you. Like, we work in a really close team, so I'm lucky enough to know the individuals really well and have had tricky conversations with these individuals. But say you're working with someone you don't know and having this tricky conversation, I think you really need to rely heavily on your interpersonal skills and understanding how someone's reacting and perhaps asking more questions.
But you know what? I completely agree with you. And I think that for me, the only way I feel like I can do that is if I've taken the time to get to know the person on a personal level, not a professional level.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think happens here a lot, is that we spend a lot of time just connecting as people, not necessarily colleagues, but just taking the time to go, you know what, we're spending 40 hours a week here, sometimes less, sometimes more. Let's get to know each other a little bit, because I think you can't have those conversations effectively unless you might know someone's communication style or trigger points or sore points or things like that, and you might tailor your approach that way. So for me, I think it's investing the time, just to regular investment of time in just getting to know the person. Yeah,
we're really lucky we have an environment like that where naturally we are getting to know each other really well, so we understand each other's trigger points or their responses and what they really mean. I think it's unique.
Yeah. So I've got a question for you, right? On the spot question.
Oh no.
This is going to be easy. I told you I wouldn't do this, but I'm doing it. Let's try and pinboard. Is that even a term? Pinboard? I don't know.
We'll coin it.
We'll coin it. What are some of the things that we should challenge? Like, what I mean is, when I first became a leader, there were some very stereotypical, cliched things that just seem like were the status quo. This is what you have to do if you're leading a team. You have to be firm. You have to do this. You have to, tell someone well done when they did a good job. You have to give them a firm kick up the butt when they did the wrong thing. And anything from behaviors or feedback, or even the way that we engage a person as an employee. What are some of the things that we as a society should challenge in leadership?
I think we should challenge addressing everything.
Tell me more.
So as leaders, we see things go wrong or not as expected or not to standard. And I think that the general expectation of a leader is to address the problem. And sometimes I think that you don't need to address it. I think that most people know. And if we refer to, parenting styles, I think you have to pick your battles. And if you've built a good relationship, and referring back to my understanding the assignment, understanding the core values, if you've got that within your team, then they probably already know. They probably know they underperformed, or they didn't hit a deadline, or they didn't hit the mark in some way. Does it need to be addressed every time, or do you need to just give them space to reflect themselves? And I'm not saying that within 24 hours they'll just come and apologise. Maybe they just quietly reflect and keep going.
Do you think in those situations there's value in – so I agree, I completely agree. And for me, I think the answer there is – and you might have a different opinion, but I think the answer there is to – if you can see that the person is doing that reflection and not – and I'm assuming, knowing you, you're not saying that they probably know, so just don't worry about it.
No.
What you're saying is I can see that they know that there's a mistake, and I can see them scrambling to fix it. I can see them reflecting on it, and I can see them making improvements.
Yeah, and perhaps they didn't say, yes, I did that thing, I'm sorry about that, it won't happen again. But if the thing happened and everyone's aware of it, I'm just saying, question the value in dragging them through the mud about it.
Yeah.
Perhaps just allow them the space and time to reflect themselves, and it may just correct itself in the long term.
Yeah. But the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the feedback. So I think what point do you think does the feedback come into it?
Perhaps if you can see that they haven't noticed and they haven't really reflected, it's
not obvious.
It's not obvious to them, or it keeps happening, then intervention needs to occur.
But it doesn't have to be a sledgehammer.
Absolutely not. And in fact, I would argue that is entirely ineffective and is going to deteriorate your relationship with them.
So it's more about making sure they've seen it, and if we can observe it, even just acknowledging that, hey, I saw you. I saw that you fixed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got a good outcome.
Yeah, or even from the classics, lead by example. Show them where you've made a mistake, or don't hide your own mistakes. And you've done that before. You've called it out and said, that was me. I made that mistake.
I thought you were going to say I've hid my mistakes.
You're not very good at hiding them. No, the lead by example. Show that you are human and that we do make mistakes. Again, coming back to parenting, if you lead by example, you're showing them that this is a safe space to be open and express that you've made a mistake, because as a group, the transparency is better anyway.
Let's explore an example of this, right? And I'm going to give you permission to tell a story here. And this is a really just a lighthearted, harmless example. But I delivered a training course in Albury. Do you know where I'm going with this yet?
Is it to do with the laptop?
Yeah. And I was at a crossroads, right? Because I'm like, okay, what I need to do is actually, no, I'll let you tell the story first, and then I'll tell you my thought process when I realised what I'd done.
Sure. If I recall correctly, you drove up to Albury to deliver a course, and I think it was a one-dayer.
Yeah.
And it was a particularly busy period of time, so we were very time poor, so you were arguably stretched too thin. And you had finished the course and were trying to make it back home in time, and had realised that you'd left your laptop in Albury. I do love that you thought, I'm too embarrassed to say out loud, so I'm just going to try and fix this problem. But on that journey, you realised you just had to share it with someone and figure out collectively what was the most productive way of dealing with this.
Yeah. So, and for context, we're talking about a 5-hour drive. So it wasn't just like going back down the road to pick it up. So I was at a crossroads, and where I was at was, I could call in sick the next day and drive back and pick it up. I could say that I'm working from home and that I'm in meetings, or I'm taking a leave day because the kids are sick or whatever it was. But you know what? At that point, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna fess up.
Yeah.
Guys, you've lost me for the day. I'm sorry. I'm available by phone. I am not ringing the client and telling them I've left my laptop. Can you put it in a box and send it to me? I'm going to fess up and I'm going to go and pick it up.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to show that you're human.
Yeah.
And that's just as simple as that.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think you've hit a point that I feel quite strongly about is humanizing individuals, because especially coming from corporate environments where the org structure is very hierarchical, there's a lot of intimidation of senior leaders and the likes, but it's often down to one single conversation about someone's children or someone's weekend or toilet training or something that really just humanizes people and breaks down barriers. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't maintain levels of respect for people more senior than you, but when there's human connection, that's where we grow. I think we have nailed that here personally.
Yeah, I feel like we have too. Yeah. So what parts of leadership are the most enjoyable for you? What do you get the most out of it?
Do you know what? I get the most out of it when I see the magic happen. Like when someone says to me, hey, I'm taking a mental health day.
Yeah.
And I'm not promoting taking unnecessary leave. The point that I'm making is that I'm proud that I've provided leadership that makes people feel safe and that people trust me. I feel as though it's a reflection upon my leadership that people feel safe.
It absolutely is. That's entirely the reason that attitude has become that way from people around you. That doesn't happen without the strong leadership. And what that also means is that you are walking the walk as well.
Yeah.
You're not just saying, oh, yeah, we've got values, we've got core values and things that we stand by. We've got a policy.
Yeah.
And here it is. It's in the folder system on the computer. And then when things get hard or things are an inconvenience, it might feel like an inconvenience in the moment.
Yeah.
We're not just turning our backs on that stuff. That's admirable. And that's something that I think that I strive for. And we've had multiple times where something's happened, or maybe someone's chosen to take a day, or maybe we've chosen to respond to a situation in a certain way where we've both gone, how good is it that's how that went?
Yeah.
And that shows that we're holding strong with our values and we're doing what we say we're going to do. That's gold, because I think mental health is something that I see a lot of hypocrisy around.
Yeah.
How many times do you see on social media, there are people that I liaise with all the time, and I'm not accusing anyone of being this way, but if I think of, for example, the average tradie, and there's a lot of posting about and concern around things like suicide rates and mental health awareness.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of the coin, I'll see or speak to some tradies who are like, oh, that person called in sick. And it's all of a sudden like, well, hang on a minute. Does the other stuff, the stuff that you were posting, these inspirational quotes and all those things about mental health awareness, did you not mean that? Or is it now that you're just feeling uncomfortable because you're inconvenienced? Now that stuff doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah. Like it's important when it's on a global level, like when it comes down to data about suicide rates, which is no joking matter.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to talk about that global data. But how did we get there? And we got there from those micro moments, and those micro moments happen in the workplace all the time, and they're the ones that could be the catalyst towards someone's mental health journey going positively or negatively. So if someone feels safe and confident to say, I need to take a mental health day, and even if it is facaded with gastro, that's fine too, right? As long as they've taken the day. But I think you've hit the next level of positivity if someone's safe enough to say, this is about mental health and I need that space. I don't want to have to get a doctor's certificate or pretend that it was a stomach flu and I have to carry this story with me for a week or so. Let's just say it. And if you've got a great leader, they're going to hold that space for you and they're going to do a check-in with you the following day. That's winning.
Yeah, 100%. And I think people might underestimate how much satisfaction there is that comes from that. I don't know that at surface level, it looks like, oh, now I'm inconvenienced, or now that there's a dip in revenue because we couldn't do that job, or whatever it might be. But I think that's looking to tunnel vision.
Absolutely.
You've got to zoom out and you've got to go, righto, yep, I'm losing out today, but I'm building something here with this person. I'm looking after their needs, because if I look after their needs, they're going to look after my needs as a leader when I need them. I can call on them later knowing that we've got a strong connection, we've got a high level of trust. That's going to pay dividends to me as a leader later. Yeah. It's an investment. It's an emotional investment. Yeah.
Yeah, and that zoom out is important as well, because, yes, you can look at it on an 8-hour shift perspective, but what about retention rates? What about retraining a new employee if that relationship breaks down enough that person leaves you? There's other financial repercussions.
Definitely. And so that's something that can be really difficult to challenge yourself on in the heat of the moment, when you're just feeling so frustrated maybe about what's happening, and that can be hard to suppress the frustration. That's where most people, I think, fall over. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can respect the frustration, but that's your journey, not theirs. And you need to harness that and sit with it for a moment, because that's a you problem. And there's someone that you and I have worked with a long, long time ago who said to us, always act with integrity. That's the easiest and the safest space. And it's carried me for so long. And it's those moments of frustration that I just have to think back to, okay, what do I do here? Let's just always act with integrity. Easy. Done.
And sometimes it's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Because sometimes, I mean, we've also both worked with people who were highly toxic co-workers and highly toxic leader.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the coin, the experience for me was that was highly toxic. You know, those experiences, and that, you know, some serious damage done to mental health, and which has lots of flow-on effects, as you know. But it can be really frustrating when you're seeing that kind of behavior, yet externally that person's portraying an image of, look how much of an innovative, fantastic leader I am. I'm people focused, and I'm breaking the mold, and I'm looking after people, and you're just going bullshit. Bullshit. Right. And because sometimes it's just a case of the person is blatantly not walking the walk. They're choosing not to. They're choosing the path of no growth. Yeah. They're choosing, you know, they're becoming stagnant. They're fixed in their mindset. But then there's some people who genuinely want to walk the walk, but in the heat of the moment can't seem to quite keep hold of those values in the way they want to handle situations, because it gets too difficult or too tense. And what I think that I've learned is that only goes away with copious amounts of self-reflection and self-critique, and being vulnerable enough to say, I stuffed that up.
Yeah, it's a journey for sure.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be the guinea pig, but it's practice.
Yeah. It really is. So here's a scenario, right? So maybe there's a really difficult conversation and you know how you want to handle a conversation, and maybe in the thick of it, it all goes out the window.
Yeah.
And you've reflected on it later and you're thinking, wow, I really let that one go.
Some serious hyper focus on that.
Yeah, and there's, I didn't follow my own standards.
Yeah.
But it's okay because I'm working towards this, right? I know how I want to handle these conversations every time, and I'm working towards it. But in the meantime, there's damage being done to relationships whilst you're getting there. So how important is the repair conversation for you?
It's second to getting the conversation right the first time.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't undo what was said in the past, and you obviously won't sleep that night hyper-focusing on the things you could have, should have done better with the knowledge that you have. But the second to that is having a repair conversation where you've collected your thoughts and your emotions and you can come back there. And it's certainly something you can practice in your personal life. You and I have chatted about how there's that crossover. And it's something to be really proud of, because I think that's really stepping outside of your comfort zone to revisit, because it feels so unnatural. Let's just close the door on that and never talk about it again. But as we know, you're closing the door on a part of that relationship if you do. So opening, it's brave. It's brave to reopen that wound potentially, but it's important.
So what do you find the most challenging as a leader?
Giving feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. As an innate people pleaser and elite level avoider of any conflict, I find giving feedback really challenging personally.
It's inherently uncomfortable.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And whilst I wouldn't avoid it if it had to be done, it's not my favourite part, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is the use of language and how you lead that. I have to remind myself that I'm a manager of people. I'm also a manager of women. I'm a mother of a girl, and I remind myself of that every day, that I need to provide the feedback for growth and in a manner that is really supportive.
For a woman who's in the workplace who has aspirations to become a leader, what challenges should they expect to come across?
All of them.
It's kind of like, where do you start, right? Because, I mean, yes, we live in a society where most people would outwardly say, yeah, let's get everyone involved. Let's get everyone in here. And men and women alike. But sometimes what we see is that, again, we talk about walking the walk. Sometimes we don't walk the walk as a society. And so what are some of the things that we think that we've mastered, but we just haven't?
Yeah, and I will say that we are very lucky to have grown and understood equality in 2024. We're in the best position we've ever been, for sure. And those big ticket items are getting closer to being ticked off, but it's the micro moments that happen all day long, the subliminal things that go on in meetings and in general interactions that we need to get better at. And ideally, it wouldn't be women pointing them out. It would be that we are all going on that journey together and that we collectively understand that these little occurrences are problems. But inherently it's women who have to point them out, which it's tricky for sure.
Because that's where a lot of men see that as conflict.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to start a fight where that's not what's happening?
Yeah.
We're just trying to point something out.
Yeah, absolutely. Why are you causing an issue when there's not an issue? But it's not an issue because they don't see it.
And don't experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge as a leader is paving the way for other women, because ideally none of us have to pave the way, but the person paving the way is having the hardest time. But when I have women working for me, it makes it easy to do because I'm doing it for the greater good.
Yeah.
And I work in an environment with men who understand and men who are open to considering challenges I pose.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
Really good.
That's a good thing. And because when I talk about the team that we have to people, sometimes what I describe is that the team who does all of our scheduling and day-to-day coordination of all of our activities are all women.
Yeah.
And I describe that team, your team, as just incredibly powerful, very powerful, because there's a lot of crossover in skill and ability, and there's a culture of no silos. So whilst each person tends to have their own, what would you call it, like a portfolio or set of clients or whatnot, that doesn't mean that the other person can't, or someone can't cross over and help out with this other client. There's no barrier there where someone says, I can't touch that or I won't touch that. And there is a crossover in values. And what that means is that there's always integrity behind every action, and there's always frustration, and there's never going to be a workplace free of frustration. But what's different is the support that happens between team members, the expectations that no one is above anything in this business. No one is above any task.
No.
But when I talk about the fact that the team is powerful, what I think some people don't realize is that, yes, I hear a lot of talk about why are we hiring just to meet quotas and things like that. But I can see validity in part of that argument because, hiring by merit is there's a lot of merit to that as well. But when you have a diverse group of people, when that could be culturally diverse, it could be by gender diverse, experience levels, there's a lot that's underestimated in how powerful that is.
Absolutely. And we had to make rules like meeting quotas because there was no other way to beat subliminal discrimination. And how else were women going to get their foot in the door if they weren't given opportunities to be that person? Then how were we ever going to get there?
Yeah. And I can give an example of this, right? I've worked with someone before where there have been comments made like, should we really hire that person because they're probably going to have babies in the next couple of years?
Yeah.
Should we really? Is this a smart thing to do? And I remember being completely floored by that statement because I'm thinking at that point we weren't done having a family. Rochelle and I weren't done having a family, and I thought to myself, I would be horrified, devastated if I found out that my daughter missed out on an opportunity because someone thought it would be an inconvenience 3 years down the track.
Yeah.
This is where people need to stop and think that it's okay. Okay, you've got an opinion, an oppositional opinion. Strip it back down to that. What opportunities do you want your children or your grandchildren to have?
Absolutely. And there's so many areas to unpack there, but if we keep challenging the social norm, how do we know that woman's partner isn't going to be the stay-at-home parent. We have to continuously challenge those social norms. And what if that woman is 7 times better than her male counterpart? You've still got 3 excellent years.
Yeah.
Or you could have had 3 years of a person who wasn't right for the position.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things, though, that isn't there that we say we should do, but we just don't do.
Yeah.
And when I say we, I'm talking about society, not our business, but because we're the best, obviously. But there's so many things that we say that we do well that we just don't do well. And I think what tends to happen is when someone finds themselves in a leadership position, they might have these intentions and they might have this vision, but if your vision isn't aligned to the people that you're working for, you're up against it.
Yeah.
You are up against it. And now what is going to happen, where it could go is that you might actually drive some incredible change. You might. Or you might be the squeaky wheel that they're not willing to listen to. So I feel like that there's a lot of people who just is it too strong to say surrender those values? Or maybe it's a lot of micro moments where I'll just let this one slide because there's too much resistance this time. And then the next time it happens again.
Yeah, and it's constantly questioning whether you should or not. I would argue, whilst it's a hard road, if you don't resist every single time, then you are part of the problem.
Yeah.
Which is, it's hard. It's a hard road. And there's a lot of individuals out there that you'll come across that will choose to see you as the problem, but that's a them thing. That's something that you've challenged within them. It's not easy, and I wish it was different, but as a mother of a 4-year-old, I have so much work to do for her over the next 15 years before she hits the workplace, and hopefully I've challenged enough people that she doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, you've recently been an emerging leader. I've recently been an emerging leader.
Yeah.
And you know other people in your life who have recently become leaders as well, that are emerging leaders. And I've had people talk to me about challenges they have, and I know you've had people reach out to you to saying, I'm struggling with certain things. What are some of the first things you think people should do when they've been made a leader for the first time? It can be so hard.
It is so hard. There's a couple of things, I suppose, that were really helpful for me, and one of them was surrounding myself by like-minded and similar people in similar circumstances. I have some very close women in my life who are in similar places in their work life, and having those conversations outside of work, be they really silly or really serious, they were really helpful to know that I was on the right track, or just to express similar concerns or similar challenges. But those conversations have led to just do it anyway. Challenge yourself every single time, which leads to my second point is everything that seems hard or too scary, absolutely do it.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to grow. Perhaps not the only way to grow, but that's how you're going to get the most growth and show the most value in your role.
So it sounds like a lot of self-awareness is a big important thing. And is that rain? Mm-hmm. It's rain. Sorry about the background noise. But when you first become a leader, self-awareness that's critical. So you need to identify where am I lacking? What sort of things do I find difficult? Or what sort of things should I expect?
Yeah.
So like you said, talking to people, getting an understanding of what it is exactly you should expect gives a great starting point, because then you find yourself at a crossroads. you're at a point where you have to say either I'm just going to try and wing it,
Yeah.
or I've got to be vulnerable enough. I can't say that word properly. Vulnerable enough to put my hand up and say, I need some support in X, Y, Z. I'm a new leader. I could use some mentoring. I could use some training. I could use some development. I could use some time to do some research or whatever it might be. Pretty hard to do that, do you think?
Yeah. And PD, in the furthest sense of the traditional go and seek a course, PD is often in mentorship and not necessarily structured mentorship. Like I said, it's sometimes conversations where you might receive some advice, whether it be on a specific topic or just in a general sense. That's where that really deep, valuable information is shared on how to be a leader.
Yeah, because I remember thinking at some point, and I've worked at several places in several companies, and I've been at places where I've gone, I could do it so much better than my supervisor. I could smash it, easy. But then when you're actually the one who's responsible for things now, everything's not what you expect.
No.
Everything is not what you expect. So you don't expect the stress. You don't expect the pressure. You don't expect the judgment. And some people really struggle with, I have to get everyone has to like me. And that I need to be likable. That's what they tend to focus on. And that focusing on not the holistic picture of I'm trying to build a culture here. I'm trying to build trust. That's if I had my time again, I'd reframe everything. I wouldn't be focusing on trying to gain the approval of people through I think I tried to fast track my approval for the people that were reporting to me by just being friendly and making sure that I wasn't upsetting anyone, doing anything to avoid any form of conflict, because I thought that if they don't like me, then the wheels are going to fall off the wagon, and it's going to be because I didn't make them like me somehow. I wasn't likable enough. What I didn't see was that quite the opposite. If I was seeing issues, what I should have done is learned the skills earlier to know how to deal with it in a way that is going to get the result, the performance result that I needed, in a way that was motivating to the person and inspiring them to improve and building trust. I didn't see any value in building trust. So I think what some people, when they focus on being likable, they're just slightly off target, I think, because I think being liked, Kwame Christian in his TED Talk makes a fantastic point. There's a big difference between being liked and being respected.
Yeah.
And there's a massive difference between, they're not even the same thing, but I think it can be just a slight misalignment with where you're focusing your own development and your own growth. You can just be slightly off if we focus on what should I do to build trust.
Yeah.
Instead.
Absolutely. And I have had leaders above me who I've really, really liked, thought they were fun and funny and very good at getting people's attention. But
thank you.
But I haven't respected them.
Oh.
So not
thank you.
But I haven't respected them. And similarly, I have had managers that I haven't necessarily liked on a personal level, but have respected deeply. And so I suppose find someone who's doing it really well and do what they do.
Yeah, talk to them.
But find your own style.
If I think back to my earlier time in my career, when I was working in Tasmania, it was one of the leaders that I thought contributed significantly to the trajectory that I found myself on, and he was very empowering. And I remember one of the first times I made a big mistake,
Yeah.
in my work down there. And I came from an environment where if you made a big mistake, your ass was kicked from here to Mount Everest. Like you copped it, and it was frightening. And every time something went wrong, you thought, is this person going to sack me?
Yeah.
And that wasn't a good way to be. And I remember the first time I made a big mistake, because I went to a very different working environment doing different work, same industry, but different work partially. And I made a big boo-boo one day. And when I went back into the office, he pulled me aside and I thought, here I go. He's going to put me back on a plane back to Melbourne. That's it. It's over. But the first thing he said to me, do you know what? The first thing he said to me was, I'm really sorry.
Oh.
And I went, please explain. And he said, well, you've made it clear to me that you weren't overly confident with that kind of work, and I haven't given you enough development or training to improve your confidence with it. So, yes, you made a mistake, and we'll talk about the impact that had in a minute, but I want you to know that I've let you down, and I know that I've let you down.
Yeah.
Right? And I cannot tell you how much instant respect and trust I gained in that leader in that moment.
That they were sharing the responsibility of the mistake, that they had a part to play in that.
He was holding himself accountable.
Yeah.
So he had self-reflected before he even had that conversation with me.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that I've carried that through my whole career, that integrity of going, you know what? Yes, I might be a leader, but I'm still accountable as well to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that threw me off. Yeah. I was like, what the hell is going on here? He's meant to be giving me an ass kicking here, and he's not. So we then moved on. The conversation moved on to, okay, here's where you went wrong. Here's where it fell apart. And what do we need to do now to help you bolster those skills?
Yeah.
So for me, again, similar to what you were saying before about making a safe space, he created a space where it was okay for me to acknowledge my shortcomings and where I wasn't feeling comfortable and my skill levels were low. He made a space for me to feel comfortable to come to him in the future and say, hey, I'm struggling with XYZ. What can we do? Whereas what I would had he not provided that kind of leadership to me, what would have happened was I would have just tried to wing it, or I would have been way too slow, or any of the above. But that accountability as a leader, I think some people fall into this mindset that I'm the leader now. I don't answer to my people. They answer to me.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I think leaders should do when something's gone wrong is, what part did I have in it?
Yeah, absolutely. If I think back to when my role was specific to compliance, it was critical for me to be successful that I knew wherever there was a gap or a non-compliance. And what I can say that I'm really proud of is that my team obviously feel really safe to talk to me. And so there have been times where a team member has come to me and said, I'm so sorry, I've made this mistake. And I just feel relieved. I'm so relieved that we could short circuit that, because the alternative was that they attempted to cover it up, which would be my problem at some point. So there's so many positives to be had by that. I feel great as a manager that my team feels safe to come to me and say, I've made a mistake. Then we can both reflect. I can reflect, and like you said, with that example you've just given, I can go, was there some shortcoming in my position? Did I not show them? Have I not written a procedure? What's the gap that we need to fill there collectively? And then we can fix the problem immediately. And I think that part's awesome. That's really great that we can all work together rather than what I imagine would my first response would be, how can I cover this up? How can I fix this problem siloed and have no one ever figure out that it even occurred?
Yeah, and I think so. I think that reaction to how can I cover it up, I would argue that that's most people's first thought when something goes really wrong.
Yeah, I think it's really natural.
Yeah, definitely. So and like you said, if that person isn't forthcoming, it's going to be your problem at some point, whether you like it, know it, or not.
Yeah.
So why not invest the effort in building a trusting team culture where people feel comfortable enough to come forward and say, we have a situation.
Yeah, and it's often a shared problem is a halved problem. It's often not nearly as big a deal as the individual who made the mistake believes it to be. You know, often it comes to me with I've made a big mistake. And my first response is, well, let's look at this. It's not actually a big mistake. It is a mistake, but it's not actually that big a deal because we can fix it.
Yeah.
And I would argue that there's not many problems in the workplace that can't be fixed.
Yeah. And I think collectively as leaders, what we can do is we can just remember that we're all people.
Yeah.
We're going to stuff up. Everyone's going to stuff up. But our response to it, I've got this thing, maybe it's semantics, but I talk about reacting versus responding.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big difference between reacting and responding. Responding means that I'm bringing some emotional intelligence to the way I respond to it. So reacting is whatever comes out, whatever's in my mind at the time. There's no filter. That for me, maybe it's semantics, but the reacting is where it's not considered. And so I think responding, I think just having the mindset that we're all people. People are going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I still make mistakes as a leader. So why are we expecting that our teams are going to be robots that produce consistent work every time?
Yeah.
And sometimes things aren't going to go to plan.
A leader once said to me, he would have fallen into the category of not someone I've liked very much, but I did respect. And it was very long ago in my career. I was quite young and I thought that it was my role to bring problems to people's attention. And partly it was. But I would bring the problem to their attention as if I was dumping it on their desk. And this person kept challenging me saying, great, I'm really glad you've brought this to my attention, but I'm not going to acknowledge it unless you're going to be a willing party to the solution. And at the time I thought, no, I'm not a manager. That's not my problem. That's a you problem. I'm bringing this to your attention for you to solve. But there's something so much more powerful than when we collectively come up with a solution. And I think that it embeds much better for the individual so that problem doesn't occur again, especially if it's a process-related problem.
Yeah, and I think that's something that also comes with maturity, doesn't it? And that's another point too, is that, you know, the industries that we serve, often the people who are leaders who have certain frustrations with the people side of their role, is that they also sometimes forget about the fact that working with younger people or leading younger people, the brain isn't fully developed yet. Mm-hmm. And there are some brain processes that they aren't completely capable of, or their brains don't have certain capabilities at a young age. In fact, we know that for the average young person, it's not until, is it around 25 that they're...
Yeah, I think it's 27 for boys.
Is it? Yeah. that the brain isn't fully developed and the prefrontal cortex is not really fully functioning. So I think that there's some power to be had in just being aware of that as well. Just even knowing that, hang on, I'm dealing with a 19-year-old here. They're not going to be able to regulate their emotions as effectively as I am, perhaps, as an example. So
it's tailoring the expectations, not lowering them necessarily, because if you've set a standard, then you've got something to measure against, but it's tailoring the expectations towards the level of maturity and cognitive abilities.
Yeah, I agree. Due to the nature of our work, we find ourselves working with young people a lot.
Yeah.
And there's certain behaviours that I've come to expect. And I used to write those off as they're naughty. Like they're naughty young kids, and I need to just set them straight and set the expectation and tell them how it is, because maybe they just haven't been told yet. Or maybe and sometimes I might think, I used to think, no, they're just being disrespectful. But what I've come to learn, and through my journey as a parent as well, and some of the learning and development I've done in that space, is that sometimes I just need to remind myself, this week I'm working with really young people.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some mucking around, and there's going to be some joking and clowning around in the classroom. And you know what? To some extent, I can let it go. If it's not being disruptive, I can let it go, or I can even join them in it to whatever extent is appropriate. I can join them in it, and because that's going to be moments of connection and things like that. But where things really change is where you learn the skills to give the feedback effectively, or to draw a line in the sand more effectively. And having, instead of saying, stop mucking around or I'm going to have to tell your manager, I'm glad you're having fun. I really am. I want this to be fun, but let's just focus for the next 20 minutes on this. And then you can have a break and you can muck around as much as you like for 10 minutes, So I think just even arming yourself with some knowledge, goes a long way as well. Yes, you need to build skills as a leader. There's no doubt about it. But even sometimes just knowing things.
Understanding your audience. Yeah.
Sometimes that goes a long way to managing your own responses to things. And I think generally speaking, our team, we're a small business, but we're not a tiny business.
No.
And for those of us who work together in the office, we're a fairly young team. I'm still claiming it. Don't look at me like that. Don't piss off. I think we're a fairly young team, but we've got people who work with us who are older as well, and we've got a pretty wide spectrum of ages. And I think if you stop and reflect on certain situations or interactions, you can see different dynamics because of that. And that's the diversity piece, right? But so, what's really powerful is that we've got some experiences in the room, or opinions in the room from people who have 40 years experience on the thing that we're talking about. But then we've got someone who's not got that in the room with an opinion, who's actually just a highly intelligent person who just has a completely different perspective. And usually when you get enough people in the room and flesh those things out and keep an open mind, you find real nuggets of...
So the magic happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where there's different dynamics and open minds to be challenged.
I think I spoke about it. Actually, no, we didn't speak about it. At our end-of-year breakout party, we put a thing in it on that rolling presentation we had on the screen in the background that was just, here's all the great things we achieved this year. And one of the things I put in there was that, and for people that don't know, being an RTO, one of the really important things to do is, there's a lot of compliance things to do. There's so many things, right? But what we do is we have, what do we call it, a PD day?
Yeah.
An annual PD day where we get everyone together and we say, righto, here's some things that we need to cover off. There's some compliance things, and let's just get it an idea of how we went with audits and how we went with statistics and all those things. Here's some little micro learnings about industry currency and all those things, right? But then what we do is we have a brainstorming session. And do you want to explain how we do that generally?
Yeah, so it's set up in categories. The lessons learned, where we have what went well, what didn't go so well, what challenges do we face. And I think that was it. But coming back to some of the themes we've discussed in this session is setting the narrative is critical for a lessons learned workshop, I believe. And the narrative is being part of the solution. So don't put a Post-it note up that says this didn't go well if you haven't already got an idea of how we could solve that problem or how it could go better next time. Yeah. So that's what I think makes that lessons learned workshop as part of our PD day so powerful, because you've already got people with ideas ready to go.
Yeah, but we also have an environment where people aren't afraid to challenge the idea.
Yeah.
As well, to say, oh, is that really a problem though? Or challenge the solutions, because we've had some really left of field, outside of the square solutions to problems, but that's only happened because we've got a lot of different people in the room, and we've actually given every person the time and authority to speak and put their idea forward, and no one feels uncomfortable doing that. And then and only then is when we've come across the really powerful solutions to problems. Because I think that, for a small business and the amount of work that we do, it's really been a case of sink or swim when it comes to, we take on a lot of work, but we've got a fairly small team.
Yeah. So
we've had to be very inventive in how we structure our processes and the way we manage our work. And
not to forget that over the last 3 years we've had a global pandemic that meant we had to innovate so quickly just to stay above board, didn't we?
Yeah. Do you remember the early days of that? I remember the first day that I was aware of it. And I think you and John were already in the office when I arrived, and we're talking about it, and you and John said, "Oh, did you hear about this?" And I'm like, "Oh, what is it?" And I think the general consensus is that, it's going to blow over.
Yeah, it was fake news.
It's going to blow over. It's nothing. But then when we realised when we were in the thick of it, and we started having everything shutting down, all the work was being cancelled, and we have this realisation that, holy crap, this is like end of days kind of thing. Well, end of days when I talk about business, like it felt like end of days for business. And when we identified our path through it, and do you remember that period of time where between you, myself, and John, we developed a new system on the fly. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to work on X, Y, Z to put ourselves in a better position if and when this thing blows over. And we also identified ways to keep things moving in that meantime. But that came because the three of us got our heads together and said, let's just put every single thing on the table.
Yeah. It was when all of our daily priorities disappeared, and we got to that list of items that are wish list things that no one ever gets to because they couldn't possibly make it to the top of the priority list. And it was magic. And there was so much crossover in roles. We just all piled on and were developing tools that we never were going to get to, and processes that we'd never be the three of us in the same room with enough brain power and time to figure out. It's almost like we need another one.
Don't. Oh, my God. Why would you even say that? Far out. How do we get from
the lessons learned
from leadership to this? I guess it all talks to the power of collaboration and being open-minded enough to listen to everybody and to not feel like you have to be the one that brings the solution to the table, and you're the one that has to do all the legwork to solve a problem, because you don't. And I think a lot of leaders put too much pressure on themselves to be the person who takes on all of those things. Because the other thing too is that, like you said before, there's a lot of growth for people in those opportunities. That the example you gave of when your leader threw back to you and said, no, you need to be a part of the solution as well.
Yeah.
That's something that sounded like you weren't ready for. You weren't expecting that. And
no. And I was actively resisting.
But it sounds like that was a conscious move on your leader's part.
Yeah, it was poignant in my career too. I still remember it, and it was more than 15 years ago. It stayed with me, and I reflect on it both when I am being managed or when I am managing, whilst his delivery I still believe was off. I reflect on that when I'm talking to my team and I'm inviting them to be part of the solution, because often the people you're managing have the answers. They know the systems already. They've got arguably a better answer to the problem than you might. So it's coming back to that point you were making about just getting out of their way or providing them the platform to innovate.
Yeah, and maybe the last topic to point, because you've arrived at a really good launching point for my next question or topic, and that's ego. Because when I realised that, hang on a minute, there's no threat to me at all in one of my team members. If I perceive that I've got a team member outperforming me as a leader, why is that a problem for me? That's actually a benefit to me. But also where I had the realization that, hang on a minute, this is the leadership. The leadership doesn't mean that I'm the one that has all the answers and I'm going to be the one that teach everyone how to do everything. That's not what it's about. It's about creating a culture and creating an environment where people have everything they need, know what they need to do, know what the right thing is to do, and feel trusted and empowered to do those things. That's where you see the growth. And it takes a lot of faith and it takes a lot of courage as a leader to let go of that and to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what? Yeah, they're my team. Now this person is a superstar.
Yeah.
But not because of me. I can be proud now that I can recognize that I'd like to think that I've created an environment for that to flourish. And I don't feel the need to take the credit for that person's performance. I don't feel the need to take that credit. They deserve the credit. They're the ones that have done the work. So as leaders, I think we just have to also learn to ditch the ego.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ditch the ego, leave it at the door. I've had people argue with me that why would I teach this person how to do my job better than me? Why would I teach this person to be better, to be as good as me? Because then I won't get the next promotion. I'm the next in line for that supervisor job.
Yeah.
And the amount of times I've had to dismantle that and say, well, maybe your leader is looking at that thinking, look how good of a job Fred is doing at coaching and mentoring that young person. Yes, that young person is a gun, is as good as Fred, but it's because of Fred's leadership. So I think sometimes we look at it the wrong way.
Yeah, we do. And I've had to deconstruct this concept that I need to know how to do everything my team knows how to do, because for a period of time I thought that's where the power in being a leader was, not because I was better or knew more, but because I felt if I was in charge of a certain department, I should need to know how to do all of the tasks within that department. But it's just not. I don't need to know how to do those things. I need an excellent team who needs to know how to do those things, who's supported really well and can come to me and I can provide support or wisdom or direction when necessary, but not unsolicited.
Yeah. Do you think maybe people just have a hard time letting that go?
Yeah.
Because maybe they feel like they haven't got control. That takes, you're not really letting go of control. The control is in the groundwork that you've done to make that the environment the way that it is. That's where the control is.
Yeah, it's deconstructing what we understand to be a valuable, productive leader. Because the narrative is that you know more or can do more or are the expert. But that's old school and not true.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Well, I think we've got to wrap this up. So, Fee, thank you so much for your time and for coming on. I've really, really appreciated your insights, because I think sometimes I would put you into the category of someone perhaps who sometimes might not even recognize their own power. And so I think I'm really glad that you eventually agreed to come on and have a chat, because you've got a lot of wisdom to share for people, and especially young women who have aspirations to come through to enhance their careers and become leaders. And you have a lot to offer there. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who your insights will resonate with. So thank you a lot for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And that was kind of you to say. I did resist and I was a bit nervous, but I'm glad I did.
Good on you. There you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Growth Project. I'm really enjoying the interaction, so please keep the messages and emails coming through. Keep an eye out for our upcoming Frontline Leader Mindset workshops at entertrain.com.au. They're in Sydney and Melbourne. And of course, you can reach out to request a private customized workshop for your team. Again, that's entertrain.com.au. That's ENERTRAIN.com.au. What would really help us send our leadership insights far and wide is 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or even just share the show with your network, family, and friends. Until the next episode, look after yourself and look after your teams.